This is the First and Big Ten podcast with CNHI sports writers Kevin Brockway and Elton Hayes. It's time to talk college football.
Welcome back to the First and Big Ten podcast. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. We head into a big Week 11 in the Big Ten in conference play, and this one will be the biggie this week, Elton. Number 5 Penn State against number 13 Minnesota. Noon kickoff on ABC. I know that you're going to be there in Minneapolis with the noon start. Might not be as chilly, but should be an interesting game nonetheless, Elton. Well, what do you see as some of the big keys for Penn State this week?
I'm hating Minnesota's offense, which has just kind of been electric over the last month. Look at Minnesota in October, 40 points, 34 points, 42 points, and most recently 52 points, against Maryland. And this is a team that's really come on as of late. You look at the way it started the season, kind of squeezing out some wins against, teams outside of the Power Five, and you kind of questioned yourself. But, the team has only thrived as an entered Big Ten play, and it's one of the hottest teams in the country right now, as evidenced by that number 13 AP ranking.
No question, Elton. When you look at the Gophers, it starts with Tanner Morgan, the quarterback, who's been very good this year. 8 games, 113 for 173, already over 1,700 yards passing, 18 TDs to 4 interceptions. He's got 3 great receivers to work with in Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, and Chris Altman-Bell. And he's got the running back in Rodney Smith that's nearing 1,000 yards. He's at 889 yards. So this is really a balanced offense. It's going to be interesting to see what Penn State tries to take away.
Yeah. Well, if I had a bet, I would say that, Penn State this season has been dominant against the run. It's really just been one of the team's strong points. However, passing the ball, teams have found success against Penn State at times throughout the air. We saw that against Pittsburgh, against Buffalo. Shea Patterson a couple weeks ago had a good outing against this Penn State secondary. So if I had to if I had to place a bet on this one, I'd say that we'd see a lot of Tanner Morgan, Rashad Bateman, and Tyler Johnson. That's one way that I think Minnesota will try to exploit this nipping line defense and try to get to its weak point.
And looking on the other side of the ball for Penn State, it's interesting because, Sean Clifford's having such a strong year. But when I watch, Minnesota head-to-head against Purdue, they had issues stopping the run in that game. Drew, Purdue's running back, ran for close to 100 yards, and to that point, Purdue had no ground game to speak of. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of running backs or what kind of running game Penn State can mount, and if controlling the clock will be the way to go.
Yeah, well, yesterday Penn State released its depth chart for Minnesota, and Noah Cain, the freshman who's really just emerged as a bright spot on that offensive unit, is going to get the start here. So it'll be his first career start. His second career start. He started at Michigan State, but left that game in the second quarter with an injury. But, before that, in the previous 2 games, he had rushed over 100 yards in each of those games. He's one of these tough backs, he's not exactly going to blow you away with the speed, but he's going to get, several yards per carry, and he has the potential to break the big runs. So it'll be a good test for him, and see where Penn State's offense can go with him leading it in the backfield.
Yeah, no question. And as we look back at some of the games over the weekend, I was obviously in Bloomington against, watching Indiana really dismantle Northwestern 34-3. They took advantage of some early turnovers in that game. They turned 2 turnovers into 14 points. Tywan Mullen, the freshman cornerback who's, won a starting job during the season, a kid from the Fort Lauderdale area, with a fumble recovery and a strip. So involved in 2 of those turnovers. And the Hoosiers seem to be hitting their stride at the right time. They go into a bye week, and then they will face Penn State the following week on November 16th. But obviously an impressive win. And for Indiana, their first they clinched their first winning season since 2007 by getting to 7 wins.
Yeah, no, that was great. Very impressive. see them just continue their dominance. The fact that Indiana is 7-2 right now, and we're the first week of November, just says it'll speak volumes to the job that Tom Allen's done there coaching. I believe this is his third year, and he's really just got that program trending in the right direction. Stevie Scott, the third, a big game. Three total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air, ran for 116 yards, and that Indiana defense is just, playing lights out, holding Northwestern to 3 points.
Yeah, Michael Penix got banged up again in the second quarter. He left, but in the first half, he, returned to the starting role. He was 10 of 15 for 162. Then Peyton Ramsey finishes it up. He's 7 of 10 for 108 and a touchdown. And I guess it's kind of like having a closer. You have a guy in Peyton Ramsey, an experienced backup who can come in any time and, keep the offense clicking.
It's a good problem to have. I'm sure a lot of coaches would like to be in that position, to have that's such an important position, and to know that you can rely on either of those guys, depending on what the game dictates. But, it's looking like, Indiana got the bye week this week. It looks like it'll come into Penn State as a ranked opponent.
Yeah, they're close. They're getting votes right now. They're up to about 27 votes. So there's a chance with more attrition this week during the bye week that Indiana could jump into the top 25. And that would certainly be interesting. But, their next two opponents, obviously Penn State and Happy Valley, and then they're at home against number 14 Michigan. So I think that'll be a little bit more of a tail or a measuring stick of where this program is at and how far it has to go to reach semi-elite or elite status. But certainly this has been a nice breakthrough third season for Tom Allen. His contract right now, he's the lowest paid coach in the Big Ten. That's going to change. There are some rumblings this week with Willie Taggart getting fired over the weekend at Florida State, that Tom Allen could be a guy that they would consider. I think it'd be a little bit of a long shot choice, but he does have ties in the state of Florida. Obviously, he's got 25 kids from the state of Florida on his roster. He recruits really well down there. He was an assistant at USF under Taggart before, coming home to Indiana. But Tom Allen strikes me as a guy who is a lifer when it comes, he's born in Newcastle, Indiana. I think he's a lifer here. I think he's a guy that wants to really build a legacy at Indiana. And, hey, look, try to get them to their first Rose Bowl since 1968, which was John Ponce, if you remember that name.
No, I don't. That might be a bit before my time, Kevin, but I'll take your word for it. It's Indiana's football history has been, that's one of the things that Tom Allen is obviously fighting. It's just, the lack of success that they've had over the last 50 years, and the fact that, you're in a state that's a basketball state, and, the basketball program kind of overshadows football. It was a little disappointing to see that, they didn't come close to selling out. And I know it was a chilly night in November, but still, you would have liked to see a little more fan support. They had about 40,000 people there, but I think given, what Indiana's accomplished, it should be a little closer to 50,000 fans. No, I think that's probably right. I saw those pictures you posted on Twitter or just before kickoff. It was a little disheartening, especially, given the fact that Allen personally went around, that previous week and was handing out tickets on campus and to people in the community. You like to see him and his team be rewarded with a little bit more support from the fan base there. But, one thing that's really impressed me with him in this program is it really seems that the players have genuinely bought into what he's selling. He's not a guy who just talk to tell that he loves it, personal to him being an Indiana guy, or rather being a Hoosier, as you all say down there. And, he may not go to Florida State. That might be a bit of a stretch, but any athletic director doing his or her due diligence would be foolish not to at least inquire on his availability, given the job that he's done there in 3 seasons.
Yeah, and given how hard the job is here as well. Another, game within the state of Indiana that was earlier Saturday, Purdue knocking off Nebraska 31-27. That nice little end-around play by David Bell for the touchdown to end the game. But this was really, I think this is more of an indictment on Nebraska. Adrian Martinez returns. He was a bit of a spark to the offense in terms of, getting a couple of rushing touchdowns. He played tough. He played hard. But, the defense just couldn't get stopped. And this isn't a Purdue team right now with Rondale Moore or Elijah Sindelar I mean, they actually knocked Jack Plummer out of the game late in the game. He's got a broken ankle, by the way, so Purdue's got the third stringer, Aiden O'Connell. But Aiden O'Connell, as the third stringer, basically led Purdue on a touchdown drive at the end of the game. And then for Nebraska not to be able to get a stop when they need it was pretty disappointing.
No, has there been a coach more snake bitten this year by injuries than Jeff Brom? But, I guess it's going to make for a very exciting quarterback competition next year. But it's good to see third-string quarterback Aiden O'Connell go in there with 6 of 6 for 62 yards on his final drive in that fourth quarter to set up that 9-yard run by David Bell. But, I think, like you said, it's more of an indictment on Scott Frost. Granted, he's in year 2 there, but this is Nebraska. This is a program that's tradition rich. The program is stocked with capable recruits, and the fact that Scott Frost is now 8-13 at his alma mater, and he's 5-10 in Big Ten contests. So that doesn't really bode too well. Adrian Martinez has been a bit of a disappointment this season. And Nebraska will we'll see what they can do here to turn the tide at the closing part of the season. But definitely a disappointing year for the Cornhuskers, and kind of take some of the luster off Scott Frost right now.
Yeah, and Scott Frost has talked about, he talked about a Big Ten Media Days back in July about maybe some of the deficiencies up front in terms of size and strength on the offensive and defensive line, and I think that's where it starts. Certainly you build around that and try to get the foundation there, because I do think they have some good skill players, obviously in Adrian Martinez and Wandale Robinson. They've got some exciting young guys, but if you can't block for them or open holes for them, it's not really going to mean anything. No,
definitely. But like I said, he'll fill some questions. That Willie Taggart being fired at Florida State in year 2, I think, kind of opens up that door now moving forward. Is it going to be the new normal, or is that going to be an outlier? But I think coaches are held to a higher standard now. Big money is involved in these decisions and these programs, and I don't know if athletic directors moving forward are going to be as patient as maybe they've been in years past. So I'm not saying Scott Frost is on any type of hot seat, but it definitely has to be in the back of his mind, especially given the developments out of Tallahassee over the weekend.
Exactly, Elton, and it's going to be, certainly interesting. The one thing Scott Frost has going for him is he's a native son, he's a Nebraska guy, so he might get a little more rope. So we'll see how that transpires. So coming up next, our Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down segment. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania with the First and Big Ten podcast.
Get the latest Big Ten, IU, Purdue, and Penn State football news by following the guys on Twitter. Kevin is at Kevin Brockway G1, and Elton is at EHDC12.
All right, welcome back to the First and Big Ten podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Our Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down segment this week, Elton, and not many games throughout the last week, but certainly there were 4 of them. And let's begin with Thumbs Up, and Stevie Scott gets my first Thumbs Up for the Indiana Hoosiers. We discussed just a really solid all-around day, 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 receiving, 136 total yards. And, I wrote about this coming into the game, kind of as the weather turns in Big Ten country, going into November, into late November, you're going to need your running game. And Indiana came into the game with the top passing offense in the Big Ten, but they leaned heavily on Stevie Scott on the ground on this game, and he delivered.
No, and, it's like I said earlier, having someone of his potential and his stability in that backfield when you're dealing with the kind of juggling the 2 quarterbacks because of injury, just speaks volumes to what he brings to that offense. He's now up to 737 yards and 10 total touchdowns this season. And, running backs coach Mike Hart has done an awesome job with kind of, taking advantage of his skill set and implementing that in that Indiana offense. So kudos to Stevie Scott, and he's been a big part of Indiana's big run this year.
Yeah, and he's on pace for another 1,000-yard season, and it didn't look that way early, but he's had to kind of stay patient with the new offensive coordinator and the new system. They were early in the season. You were doing a lot of screen passes that were kind of basic bubble screens that were basically designed as almost like handoffs, and it worked out. But what's happening now is by stretching the defense horizontally, it's opening up some holes for Scott in the running game, and he's taking advantage of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm going to stick with the Hoosier State for my first thumbs up, and I'm going to give it to Purdue freshman wide receiver David Bell. Purdue's another one of these schools that has dealt with a instability at positions, mainly quarterback and wide receiver, due to those injuries. And David Bell has just really stepped up as a freshman and shouldered a lot of that load. He only had 23 yards receiving on 7 receptions on Saturday, but his 9-yard touchdown run there, the minute and 8 seconds left to go in the fourth quarter, was just a big-time play, and it propelled him to victory. So David Bell has been a source of consistency for Purdue this year, and he gets my first thumbs up this week.
Yeah, my second thumbs up, Elton, is going to go to Lovie Smith. What a tremendous job that he's done of late. They've won 3 in a row. He's got them believing. A lot of people picked Illinois to be last in the Big Ten this year in their division in the Big Ten West, and that certainly has not been the case. They're up to 5-4 now. He's getting the defense to play really well. They're scoring defensive touchdowns. Brandon Peters has come along nicely. And it looks like Illinois is going to go bowling at 5-4, and Lovie Smith is going to be safe in terms of his job status.
Yeah, Lovie Smith, the media days talked about, trying to just starting fresh this year, hit that reset button. And it was a little shaky at first, but that win against Wisconsin really changed the trajectory of this team. And like you said, they're 1 win away from bowl eligibility, and Lovie Smith is coaching some good football right now. And Illinois has become a, I'm not going to say they're a threat to win the conference, but they're a formidable Big Ten opponent right now.
Yeah, it's a tough job there in Champaign. They haven't had a lot of success lately. The last time they went to the Rose Bowl was when Ron Zook, the Zooker, got him there in 2007.
Yeah, Juice Williams, Aurelius Finn.
I know, good old Juice Williams, and it was Zook couldn't sustain it there. He was let go, and now Illinois is doing well. So, who we got for a thumbs up next, Elton?
My second thumbs up goes to Michigan and head coach Jim Harbaugh. The program, the first weeks of the season was kind of mired in dysfunction. People were calling for Jim Harbaugh's job, and I'm not saying that they weren't right to question him, but I think some of those cries have been tapered a little bit. They got a big win at Maryland, 38-7 win on Saturday. They've now won 5 of their last 6. They beat a decent Notre Dame team 2 weeks ago and kind of stabilized that program. And Michigan is on track for a 9-win season.
Yeah, they're going to get to a nice bowl game. I know the expectations were a little higher going into the season, but you never know. I mean, if they could somehow beat Ohio State and pull off that upset to end the season, it would put a nice cherry on top of, the season, and certainly, give Jim Harbaugh something to build off of going into the 2020 year. So my third thumbs up, I'm sticking with Illinois, going with Dele Harding, senior linebacker, had a hand in 2 of Illinois' defensive touchdowns, returned an interception 54 yards for a touchdown, and forced a fumble that was returned 36 yards for a score. Plus had 12 tackles. I mean, he was all over the field. Elton, and he's a Maryland kid. He's from Elkton, Maryland. I know that's kind of dear to your heart, but he definitely played a solid all-around game on Saturday.
So I know that had to make Lovie Smith, who's also the defensive coordinator, that feel really good. But he's the heartbeat of that defense. He's doing really good things, and he's like I said, he's the leader of that defense, and they go the way he goes. And, I'm sure Lovie Smith is. Had a lot of praise for him being a defensive-minded coach and seeing one of the guys from his unit go out there and put on that type of performance.
No question, Elton. And you've got one more thumbs down. Let's Let's lay it out.
Yeah. My final thumbs up goes to Indiana. This is a program that has really been impressed by the consistency and the way they've kind of done things this year. Like I said, they're up to 7 wins right now. They're on a 4-game Big Ten win streak, which is the first time since 1993 that can be said. They've beaten 2 Big Ten opponents this year by 30 or more points. They got Rutgers. They got Rutgers on October 12th, and they put up over 30 points on Northwestern this past week. So really excited to see where they go. They're ending near the end of the season, but it's 7 wins, and we're looking at just in the first week of November right now. It's very impressive, and it speaks volumes to the job that Tom Allen has done there.
Yeah, and Tom Allen in the press conference following the game with an interesting comment, he said, "Nobody is surprised by what we're doing. We expected it." I think he feels like there's an inner belief with this team that they can achieve high goals, and I do think the next 2 weeks are going to be telling because, Indiana's closing in on a national ranking, possibly a top 25 ranking, but you've got 2 big ranked opponents ahead in Penn State and Michigan, and that'll be another kind of measuring stick, as I mentioned before, to see where the program is. So moving on to my first thumbs down, I'm going to go with Aiden Smith from Northwestern. He had a couple of turnovers. He was benched for Hunter Johnson at quarterback, and just not a strong day. He did scramble the ball, okay, did a little bit of good things, but only 47 yards passing on 5 of 12 completions. Northwestern's offense needed to do better than that and stay in the game, and they didn't.
Yeah, I just don't know what's going on with that offense this year. I've read some reports that some people want to see a change in offensive coordinator, but, Hunter Johnson was supposed to be the savior of that offense and kind of take over last year for, I think, Clayton Thorson, and he hasn't been able to do that. They've had to go with Aiden Smith. He hasn't really gotten much production, and, it just kind of speaks to the dysfunction that's going on with Northwestern's offense right now. I've got to agree with you on giving them a thumbs down. My first thumbs down is going to go to Scott Frost. I think he's been largely disappointing. He got a pass last year for being his first year and kind of rebuilding that program. And I'm not saying that you can rebuild a program in 2 seasons, but at least definitely see signs of production or progress. And we really haven't seen that. Nebraska, I listened to Scott Frost's press conference after the game, and he said that one thing he knows how to do as a coach is to move forward, and they're going to kind of reevaluate everything from the way the players are playing, the way they're coaching, and he said his heart goes out to his players, and I definitely can understand that as a fan, given the way that they've been performing this season. But Scott Frost is definitely going to have to do a little bit more to instill more confidence in what he's doing and in that program right now. If Nebraska is expected to return to some of the glory of yesteryear and be competitive in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Scott Frost is having a hard time, no question, and it's gonna take a little bit of it might take a little bit of more time before things come through there. So we'll see how that transpires. My second thumbs down is going to go to the Rutgers run defense. He will have 204 yards on the ground. They certainly defended the pass well enough to win that game, holding Brandon Peters to 120 yards passing, but bunch of guys had some big days on the ground, and Peters hurt him with some scrambles, 3 for 41. Reggie Corbin, 13 for 51. Brown with a 2-yard touchdown run. Rutgers was competitive for a half in that game. It was 10-10 at halftime, and just in the second half, some turnovers did them in as well. Loud turnovers that led to touchdowns, but if they could have stopped the run a little better, they would have had a chance.
No, I'm kind of torn on Rutgers right now. I know I've beaten them up a lot this season, and I understand they're doing this with an interim coach, so I don't want to be too difficult on them. But there's just, they're playing basketball right now. There's no other way to say it. There's a lot of distractions going on there. Glad to see them get that win a couple weeks ago against Liberty, but I think that's going to be the last time we see Rutgers get a win. My second thumbs down is going to go to Maryland head coach Mike Locksley, who dropped his 4th consecutive game last week, to Michigan, 38-7. The only Big Ten win that Maryland has right now is, to no surprise, Rutgers. That 63-21 against Syracuse on September 7th feels like forever ago, but we just don't see any signs of progress with Maryland right now. And once again, I listened to a lot of his post-game press conference, and he was saying all the things that you want to hear out of the coach, but I just don't know what's going on there right now. I understand that it's a rebuilding project. He inherited a program that had a lot of controversy, but for consecutive loss, it's just not really getting the job done in College Park, and Mike Locksley's going to get my second thumbs down of the week.
Yeah, and Josh Jackson returned to quarterback, but he's only 9 of 20 for 97 yards with an interception, so certainly he did not provide the spark to the offense that they had been hoping, and as a result, Maryland is 3-6 right now, and doesn't look like they'll be going bowling after a season that, as we said, they were ranked in the top 25 in September.
Yeah, they were. Grand opening, grand closing.
Yeah, so it's certainly been a disappointment. My final thumbs down, I'm going to stick with Nebraska. I'm going to go with their defense. The inability to get stops late in the game. 427 yards of total offense for Purdue. They let a third-string quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, drive down the field and get the winning score. Really disappointing effort all along for Purdue's defense, rather Nebraska's defense, not being able to get the stops when they needed them.
Well, you summed it up right there. They're not facing the Rondell Moore. They're not facing the Elijah Sindelar or in this game with Jack Plummer, and to still give up that amount of defense is disheartening. So no arguments with me, or no arguments for me there on giving Nebraska's defense your final thumbs down. My third thumbs down is going to go to Northwestern's offense. Kevin, you were there in person. You saw it. It's a bit of a mess right now. And I don't know what Pat Fitzgerald's going to do to turn it around because he doesn't have that much time left. If my numbers are correct, the Northwestern has only scored has scored just one touchdown since the beginning of October, which is just baffling when you think about the fact that this is a team that won the Big Ten West last year. So Northwestern's offense, they scored just 16 points in the last 4 games, and they finished that second half of the game against Indiana with 36 yards of offense in those last quarters. So Northwestern's offense is going to get my third thumbs down.
Yeah, and apparently Pat Fitzgerald was just losing his mind on the sideline for a number of reasons, mainly because of the pass interference penalties. And I had a friend that texted me, and she was like, she said, "What, God, Pat Fitzgerald, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, he's just frustrated because his team is not very good this year." That's how I summed it up. It's just been one thing after another when it comes to Northwestern.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's surprising considering the fact. I mean, I don't know if I expect them to go out there and repeat as Big Ten West champions. But if you would have told me that at this point of the season, Northwestern would be 1-7 and winless in the Big Ten, I just wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, it's been a really kind of perplexing, and they still have a decent front seven defensively, but it just really hasn't transpired. All right, and so coming up, we'll have Megan Ryan from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune to discuss the Penn State-Minnesota matchup. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania on the First and Big Ten podcast.
Don't go anywhere because it's time for Voices of the Gridiron. Here's today's special guest.
Today on our First and Big Ten, we have Megan Ryan, who covers Minnesota for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Thanks for joining us today, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So I know you're well rested from the bye week and ready to get back to some football, as am I. But I wanted to first ask you, how is the buzz around the Minneapolis community heading into this weekend's Big Ten?
There's definitely a lot of buzz. I'm not super old, but I think definitely in my lifetime, this is the most that I can remember people being excited about Gopher football. A lot of the times it's kind of this thing that is sometimes okay, most of the time pretty average, and people kind of, forget about it by this point of the season. But there's been a lot of buzz, and it started last year when they beat Wisconsin and they won in the bowl game. I mean, those were kind of big wins that hadn't happened in a while. And then this season, I think it's been kind of a surprise that they're 8-0 still. So definitely there's a lot of excitement around it. I do think, though, that a lot of people are maybe being conservative a little bit. Like, this Penn State game is going to be the big test, right? So I think there's a fair amount of people that are also waiting to see what happens there before they fully get on board.
Okay. Well, if you look at Minnesota this year, at the beginning of the season, the Gophers managed some 7-point, 3-point, and 1-point wins against early season opponents like South Dakota State, Fresno State, and Georgia Southern. But in the last 4 Big Ten games, you're seeing some pretty lopsided wins. What, in your opinion, has contributed to that uptick in production on both sides of the ball here in Big Ten play for the Gophers?
I don't know. It's hard to say what caused the uptick unless it was just, they needed some time to warm up. Who knows? It was interesting that the beginning of the season, I think what was weird was there were all these facets that we were kind of interested to look at. And so we knew the wide receivers were going to be good, and they were probably the only unit of the ball that really lived up to that expectation because they've been good throughout the season. But the run game was another thing that everyone was expecting to be good with Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks coming back from injury, and they should have, 3 number 1 potential guys at that position. And it really wasn't, it kind of stalled at the beginning, and part of that was the offensive line. Part of that was, Rodney Smith, who's kind of been the number 1 guy. He needed some time, I think, to get back on track after his injury last year. So that really wasn't up to snuff. And then the defense, I think, too, that was really their Achilles heel their whole last season until they switched defensive coordinators. And Joe Rossi having a full off season, it was kind of, can he maintain the momentum that he started last year? And at the beginning of the season, it didn't quite look like that. And, again, part of that was they were missing Kamal Martin, who's their star linebacker, and he was gone for like the first and third games of the season with various suspensions and injuries and stuff. So that maybe played a bit of a part. But really what you've seen, like ever since after that Purdue game, the last 4 games, they've really kind of put it all together. It's been kind of fascinating to watch. The passing game is still good. The run game is finally figured out. They got their outside zone all figured out. So, that is looking really dangerous. And it's combining with the pass game to really kind of trip people up. And then you've got the defense that somehow is, had the light bulb go on, and now they're not allowing touchdowns until, at the end of the game in the fourth quarter when they've got most of their backups on anyways. So really all of that has come together, which I think is really fascinating. Still the part of the ball that I have a lot of question marks about is special teams, which I get is not sexy to talk about, but that's been an area where they have weird stuff happen every single game. It's kickoffs out of bounds, it's muffed punts, it's blocked field goals. There's always something weird going on there. And that, I think, looking back to the last time they played Penn State in 2016, which I actually covered on the Penn State side, that game was double overtime, and it came down to trading field goals back and forth. And so I'm a little worried if that's what this kind of game comes down to, then that's where you're going to see the Gophers' weakness exposed.
Okay. You had mentioned the offensive line there, and I just wanted to kind of talk about that for a minute. I'm looking at that roster, just doing some pregame stuff, and these guys are 6'6", 6'7", 300+ pounds. I believe there's Daniel Falele, 6'9", 400 pounds. This is a massive offensive line, and probably could be up there at the end of the season with one of the most, physically wise, the most dominant that Penn State has seen this year. Penn State's defensive line, which is led to a lot of the success. It was one of the country's best in against stopping the run. I believe it's second in the nation in run defense. How do you see that battle in the trenches between Penn State's defensive line with guys like Vitor Dos Matos, Shaka Toney, 2 really good defensive ends unfolding against Minnesota's offensive line?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting. PJ Fleck actually said yesterday when I talked to him that the defensive line that Penn State has is going to be the best that they've seen all year, by far, and that's no disrespect to the other teams they've played, but they're 2-3 deep at that position. They rotate guys, and they've got guys that can not only stop the run but can pass rush too. So it's you're really never safe wherever you are against that line. So that is going to be a real test. And their offensive line, while it has looked a lot better in the last couple of games, and part of that is actually because they started this new offensive line rotation, which is kind of wonky, but they have their starting O-line, and then they rotate in a new center, and they rotate out guards. And then their guards shift position. It's super weird, and they do it basically based on the series. One series it'll be the first, the starting offensive line, and the next series it'll be the new center with a different left guard, and then it'll be new center with a different right guard. It's very weird. But that has worked really well for them because they feel like they have 6 starting linemen. So that's worked well. There's good chemistry there. I think they've got the rotation down. But this is going to be a really, really big test for them. And I think, early in the season, this offensive line was exposed a lot for they have the size and the heft, but they don't necessarily have the technique and skill down yet. And part of that's because it's a pretty young line. Daniel Falele, for example, he's got the size for sure, 6'9", 400 pounds. But he's only been playing football for a couple of years because he was kind of discovered in Australia and went to IMG Academy. So there's a lot of things that he doesn't quite have down yet. And so I think you can have the size, but if you don't necessarily have the experience yet, that's where maybe a really good defensive line can kind of expose that. But they have been looking really good. So I think this will be kind of a litmus test for them.
Hi, Megan. Kevin Brockway here. PJ Fleck strikes me as a fun coach to play for. How has he kind of instilled a belief in this team throughout the season, particularly early in the season when they pulled out those close games to the point now where they've, developed and they're starting to pull away from Big Ten teams? PJ, I think he's done a really good job. And actually the breaking news last night that I broke, thanks. But breaking news last night was that they're going to give him a new contract that's kind of nearing maybe today or possibly, sometime this week they're going to announce that. So, people are very pleased with him. I think, there are some who maybe question, like, okay, he's 8-0 so far, but, they didn't play anyone so far. They had those really close non-conference games, and I think all of those are valid. But what I would say is that the weird thing about this team is, like, they've still won. So you can be upset that they didn't play anyone or they had close games, but the fact of the matter is like, they're still 8-0. Who's not? Wisconsin? Like, that's a very good team, and they dropped to Illinois, and you could say that they shouldn't have done that. But, things happen, and so there is something to say about having a team that is able to pull out wins, even if it doesn't look like they should. There is something to say about that, and I think that's really been the kind of test of the Gophers so far this season. And as far as PJ, if you look back at, his introductory press conference, he's kind of predicted exactly what he was going to do here, and he proved that he did it at Western Michigan, but he's doing it again. He kind of said, I'm going to come in. The first year's not going to be very good because I'm just going to be trying to, instill my culture and get everything figured out. And then the second year will be a little bit better, but still not really good. And then by the third year, things are going to start to come together, and we could probably challenge for a Big Ten title. And everyone was like, okay. But here they are. They've got a 2-game lead in the West. So I think he has kind of panned out, for better or worse, if you like him or don't, or he's too energetic for you. He's kind of done what he said he was going to do. So you really can't knock him for that. Megan, I was at the Purdue game, and, you touched on the special teams, and I do remember there was an onside kick that was recovered. But also the run defense was, I think, a little bit exposed in that game. Purdue hadn't been able to run the ball very well all season, and they ran, King Daru, I think, ran for close to 100 yards in that game. How have they kind of shored that up, or is that maybe a concern heading into Penn State?
It definitely has gotten a lot better. In the past couple of games. That Purdue game was kind of their final straw. And then I think if I remember correctly, that was the game where they just could not tackle for the life of them. They would be in the right spots and they would get on the guy and then they just wouldn't wrap up, and then they would break the tackle and continue on. And so they really focused on tackling after that game, and it has been a lot better. They've been able to finish. But I think the other thing that will be interesting with the defense is they've got really good players Carter Coughlin's their best pass rusher on the D line. Kamal Martin at linebacker is really important in that run defense. And then you've got Antoine Winfield at safety, who's not only good in the pass coverage, but he moves up into almost a linebacker spot sometimes and can be very dangerous up front too. So those are all key cogs in the machine. I think the problem is Kamal Martin is injured right now. He missed the Maryland game. And he's been called a game-time decision for this game. My guess is he plays because it's a pretty big game. But, if they don't have him or he's not at 100%, I think that could make a big difference in the run defense, too.
Well, Megan, thank you for joining us on our First in Big Ten. We really appreciate your time. We'll see you on Saturday.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Megan, thank you, and congrats on breaking that story as well. We'll be on the lookout for it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, and coming up, our predictions. This is Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania for the First and Big Ten podcast.
Want to see more from Kevin and Elton? Subscribe to a CNHI newspaper near you.
Welcome back to the First and Big Ten podcast. Kevin Brockway from CNHI Sports Indiana with Elton Hayes from CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Our predictions once again this week, Elton, and let's begin with Purdue against Northwestern. Northwestern is a 1-point favorite at home. Purdue's down to the third-string quarterback, but these are two struggling teams. Purdue does have the momentum from, knocking off Nebraska at home the week before. And even with Aiden O'Connell, I think Purdue's going to find a way to win this game.
Yeah, I just don't have any faith in that Northwestern offense right now. Like you mentioned, the defense is solid, but the offense, 16 points over the last 4 games, is just not going to cut it. I think Purdue, like you said, even with the third-string quarterback, gets the win on the road.
Maryland against Ohio State in the Horseshoe, a noon game. It's the Fox game. We've discussed the Terps struggling of late. Certainly, they've had their issues. I really don't see any way Maryland is going to pull this out.
Now, this is going to be a blowout from end to end. Ohio State wins big on this one here.
Illinois against Michigan State, 3:30 p.m. game on FS1. Illinois, they've won 3 in a row, we saw Indiana go in there and almost beat Michigan State. And, Michigan State, they've had a bye week to try to figure some things out in terms of offensively. This is a close game. I think Michigan State will find a way to pull it out at home, though.
I'm going to go with Illinois on this one. Michigan State's kind of devoid on offense. They lost Joe Bocci for the year after he was suspended and ruled ineligible by the Big Ten for testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs. I think there's just a lot of distractions with that program. I think Lovie Smith is going to kind of use that to his team's advantage and get a road win in East Lansing.
Iowa at Wisconsin, the Hawkeyes, a ranked matchup here with two teams in beautiful Camp Randall Stadium. I think Wisconsin gets back on track. I think Jonathan Taylor runs the ball fairly well. I know Iowa's got a decent run defense, and they're good up front, but I think Wisconsin, still feels like they have a little bit to play for New Year's Day Bowl. I think they're going to find a way to pull this one out.
I agree with you. I think they're going to. This is going to be part of their late season surge to try to kind of pretty up that resume for a bowl bid, and I think they take care of business against Iowa.
All right, and the biggie, you're going to be there, Milton. Penn State at Minnesota. It's going to be at TSF Bank Stadium. I wonder if Prince ever played there.
That's a good question. I'll see if they have any posters on the wall commemorating his appearance.
Yeah, I was up there, Elton, and I will definitely recommend the Loon Lodge. That's a fun place to go in Minneapolis. Also, Eric the Red, which is across from the new football stadium there, where they held the Final Four, where the Vikings play. A beautiful, beautiful stadium there. But this is going to be outdoors. Penn State will. How are they going to handle the elements? How are you going to deal with P.J. Fleck and that balanced offense? Minnesota, I think with the schedule, the fact that they haven't necessarily been tested yet, I think will play to Penn State's advantage, and I think Penn State's going to find a way to win this game.
I do. I mean, both these teams are coming off of a bye week. Penn State will be without, starting defensive tackle Antonio Shelton, who was suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that he drew against Michigan State. But this James Franklin last week said they're going to plug in defensive tackle Robert Winter, who's a starter, along with backup T.J. Mustipher, who's played a lot of snaps this season. So that'll challenge him a little bit, just kind of getting used to that rotation. But I think Noah Cain is where he really excels in these type of games. I think the running game will propel Penn State to a close victory, but a victory nonetheless.
Yeah, and what do you see as kind of the biggest key in this game as far as Penn State's concerned?
I think it's the offense. One thing that Penn State hasn't done that well this year is just really, been consistent across the board for offensively. I think a lot of it had to do with the lack of a clear-cut run game. I think with finally having their guy Noah Cain, if he can stay healthy, I think that they can get that run game going and sustain those drives and capitalize in the red zone.
Well, Elton, it's certainly going to be a great atmosphere, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Be sure to, pack your long johns, pack your, thermal undershirts.
I'll have it all.
It's going to be a little chilly there, but I'm sure you're going to have it's going to be quite a Donnybrook, an excellent game here, and only one team will leave undefeated, so we'll see how that transpires. So. For Kevin Brockway, this is Elton Hayes on the First and Big Ten podcast, signing off.
Thanks for listening to your number one source for college football and Big Ten news, the First and Big Ten podcast. Enjoy the games.